I was halfway across the restaurant when my father saw me. He set down his glass and stiffened, like I'd walked in wearing a police uniform instead of the dress I'd bought just for tonight. Across the table, my mother's smile faltered, her hand flying to her chest while my sister leaned closer to the man beside her. Then that man, my sister's boyfriend, stood and said, "Wait. Olivia's your sister. She's my boss." The silence that followed felt like it pulled the walls in. Closer. Napkins froze, mid-air. Wine glasses stopped just shy of lips. My mother blinked twice and whispered, "Oh dear, before I go any further, tell me where you're tuning in from and hit that like button." If you've ever found yourself left out of your own family's celebration just because someone decided your presence made things inconvenient. I'm Olivia Barrett. I'm 35, and I've spent most of my life learning how to stay small without disappearing completely. I grew up in a quiet part of Connecticut where birthdays meant sheet cakes, from the grocery store and holidays meant folding chairs in the garage. My parents believed in good manners, hard work, and putting family first. At least that's what they always said out loud. I was the oldest child, the one who followed rules without being asked who learned piano and stayed in honors classes because it made things easier. My sister Morgan came 4 years later, all curls and confidence. She danced through childhood, like life owed her a stage, and somehow the stage always showed up, whether it was cheerleading tryouts or a last-minute family toast. Morgan was the one they watched. My mother Diane beamed at her from the bleachers. My father Robert introduced her at parties with that familiar phrase, "Our bright star." And when I graduated college with honors, I got a handshake and a nod. When Morgan scraped by with a degree in communications, they threw her a backyard brunch with engraved invitations. I didn't complain, not out loud. I worked internships through school, took night classes in digital marketing, and landed a junior role at Meridian Enterprises. By the time I was 30, I was running my own team. My apartment overlooked the river. I had a reliable car and a handful of people who checked on me. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. I kept things polite with my family. Sunday dinners here and there, Christmas cards, birthdays when I was invited. Not always and not always on time, but just enough to keep things from falling apart. So when a formal envelope arrived in the mail last spring, cream cardstock, gold trim, it didn't feel suspicious, just overdue. The invitation was for my mother's 56th birthday dinner at the most exclusive steakhouse in Hartford. Saturday, May 15th. I circled the date in my calendar, bought a navy cocktail dress on sale, and picked out a brooch that looked just like one she used to admire in my grandmother's drawer. 3 days before the dinner, my phone rang. It was my father. His tone was, "Clipped, Olivia." "There's been a change of plans," he said. "Your mother wants this night to be smooth. No tension, no drama." I told him there hadn't been any drama. Not with me, not in months, but he cut me off. Morgan said, "You two had words, and frankly, we just don't want any stress on your Mother's Day." I asked him what words he meant. He didn't answer, just muttered something about how things always got difficult when I was around, and that they'd do lunch with me next week, and then the line went dead. I stared at the screen for a long time. I'd been uninvited from my own mother's birthday because of a story that hadn't happened, or maybe a story Morgan had already told, one that didn't need me in the room to be believed. I tried calling my mom. No answer. I texted her. Got nothing. And by Saturday night, I was on my couch still holding the wrapped brooch, watching the clock tick past dinner time. If only I'd known then what I know now, that the man sitting beside Morgan at that table was the same man I'd just promoted, the same man who'd walked into my office 6 months earlier, smiling like fate had dropped him right into my path. I stayed home that Saturday night like they asked. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the couch, the blue dress I bought still hanging by the door. The brooch I'd wrapped for my mother sat unopened on the coffee table, tied with a ribbon I'd ironed flat the night before. Outside, I could hear a neighbor's laughter drift through the screen window. Inside, it was just me and the dull flicker of a movie I couldn't pay attention to. A part of me thought I should have gone anyway, not to cause trouble, just to be present. But they'd made it clear they didn't want me there, and I wasn't going to give them more reason to paint me as difficult. At work, I had no such reputation. Things were solid, steady. I'd built my team from the ground up. Clients respected my judgment. My staff knew I was fair. And then about 6 months before that birthday dinner, Jake walked into my office for his final round interview. He was polite sharp and came prepared with ideas for a brand I hadn't even mentioned in the job posting. He spoke with confidence, but never overstepped. I liked that. I hired him for the Stratton account, one of our most demanding clients, and he got to work right away without hesitation. Over the next few months, Jake became the kind of team member every director hopes for. He listened more than he talked, handled feedback without defensiveness, and quietly made everyone around him better. I noticed he never stayed long at lunches or talked much about his personal life. When the rest of the team joined a trivia night or grabbed drinks, he often declined. But he never missed a deadline and never asked for credit. Then came the Peterson scare. A miscommunication almost cost us our biggest client. Tensions were high. I was on calls all weekend. Jake volunteered to take the lead on the revised pitch. He stayed late, pulled in graphics, rewrote the campaign narrative from scratch. By Monday morning, we didn't just salvage the account, we impressed them enough to expand the deal. That's when I offered him the promotion. He looked genuinely surprised when I told him, like it hadn't crossed his mind to expect it. I remember saying, "You earned it," and he said, "I won't let you down." In the weeks that followed, we worked more closely on client-facing campaigns. Always professional, always respectful. If we chatted at all, it was about the weather or sports. One night, waiting for a mock-up file to render, I asked if he had any plans for the weekend. "It's our anniversary," he said. 3 years. I smiled and said congratulations. He didn't say her name, just said it hadn't always been easy, but it was worth it. I nodded and we left it at that. Nothing about it seemed unusual, until 2 days before the birthday dinner. I was reviewing personnel records for our upcoming retreat, updating emergency contacts. It was routine. I clicked into Jake's file to verify his details. That's when I saw it, emergency contact Morgan Barrett. I stared at the screen. The name flickered in my mind like a word you've seen too often but suddenly can't place. There are a lot of Morgans, and Barrett isn't rare. Still, something stuck. I pulled up his address, South End. I remembered Morgan mentioning her new place there last spring. I opened her Instagram and scrolled. Usual stuff, her with friends' brunch plates, gym selfies. Every now and then a post captioned date night or 3 years with this one, always paired with a photo of a hand or a drink or a shoulder. No names, no faces, always just a hint. But I kept scrolling, back through holidays, vacations, parties. Then I saw it. A group photo from New Year's Eve. Morgan in the center, surrounded by friends. In the back, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was Jake. He was at her party, in her photos, for over a year. My hands felt cold against the keyboard. I pulled up his onboarding file again. He'd applied 6 months ago, around the time Morgan had stopped texting me altogether. I sat back in my chair. The pieces fit too easily. She hadn't just known. She'd suggested he apply. She'd placed him at my company, right in my department. I called Erin. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Liv, this isn't the first time. Remember college? Your roommate started spreading rumors right after Morgan visited. Or when she dated your ex-boyfriend a month after he dumped you, I remembered. The roommate stopped talking to me the same week Morgan stayed the weekend. Tyler broke up with me without explanation and was with Morgan by the end of the month. She told me later he always liked her better. Do you think Jake knows I asked?" "I doubt it," Erin said. "But I'd bet money Morgan does. Maybe she thought having him close to you would give her an edge. Or maybe it's just control. Either way, you need to show up on Saturday." "I wasn't invited," I reminded her. "Since when does the truth need an invitation?" she said. That night, I took the blue dress out of the closet and laid it across my bed. I polished the brooch box, then placed it in my purse. At work the next day, I watched Jake carefully. He acted no differently, asked for feedback on a client brief, followed up on a meeting summary, sent a polite thank you after a presentation review. If he was in on something, he didn't show it. And that's what made the whole thing harder. Either he was completely unaware, or he was a much better actor than I realized. I didn't know which was worse, but I knew one thing. I was going to that dinner. And whatever happened once I walked through those doors, I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The night of the dinner, the sky held that soft pink hue that only lasts a few minutes in May. I parked a block away from the restaurant, smoothed the fabric of my dress in the driver's seat, and took one deep breath before stepping out. I hadn't worn heels in months, but I'd chosen silver ones that made me feel steady, not flashy. As I walked down the brick sidewalk toward the Charleston, I could see the soft golden lights inside. The windows glowed. Through the glass, I spotted them, my family seated at a long table set with crystal and linen. My mother in burgundy, my father gesturing with one hand, Morgan with her shoulder angled toward Jake. I paused just outside the entrance. My hand brushed the edge of my purse where the brooch rested inside its box. I pressed the door open. The maitre d' greeted me with a practiced smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation? I'm with the Barrett party," I said, keeping my voice even. He checked his tablet. "I don't see an additional guest listed." "It's all right," I replied. "I'm family." Before he could protest, I stepped past him and walked across the room toward the table. My father saw me first. His face shifted confusion first, then tight disapproval. "Olivia," he said, his voice sharper than it needed to be. "What are you doing here?" My mother turned slowly. "Oh, dear." Morgan sat up straighter, her hand still resting lightly on Jake's arm. Jake looked up, offering the polite smile I'd seen a dozen times in meetings. Then his expression changed, his brow furrowed. "Olivia," he said, standing up. "Wait, what are you doing here?" My father looked from Jake to me. "You two know each other." My mother looked just as bewildered. Jake turned to them. "Ms. Barrett is my boss," he said. "Director of Marketing at Meridian." Morgan's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Then Jake turned back to her eyebrows raised. "Wait. Olivia's your sister." The silence was complete. I stood still and let the weight of that moment hang. I reached into my purse and set the small gift box on the table. "Happy birthday, Mom." Jake blinked rapidly. "I don't get it. You never told me your sister's name was Olivia. You've talked about her for years." "I didn't know it was her." Morgan sat frozen. How was I supposed to know where she worked? Jake looked at her. "You told me to apply at Meridian. You helped with the application. You even said your friend gave you the listing." My father raised his voice. "What's going on?" A waiter approached the table, his smile faltering. "Is everything all right?" My mother took a breath. "Please bring another chair for my daughter." The look on Morgan's face was sharp and cold. The waiter returned and slid a chair between Jake and my father. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. Jake leaned forward slightly. "I really don't understand. Mel, you told me your sister was distant. You never mentioned her by name. And now I find out I have been working under her for 6 months. Morgan's voice cracked. "I didn't think it mattered." My father frowned. "Is this true, Morgan? You told him to apply there?" Morgan's words came quickly. "I wanted him to find a good job. That company has a reputation." "But why hide it?" my mother asked. Morgan shifted in her seat. "Because she would have ruined it for him." Jake looked from her to me. "You told them Olivia was threatening our relationship." Morgan didn't answer. Jake's voice grew tighter. "You said she was jealous, that she always tried to compete." My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My father sat back, arms crossed. "What did you say exactly?" he asked. Morgan shrugged. "That she was always the favorite, that she made me feel small." My mother closed her eyes. I spoke quietly. "I didn't even know Jake was your boyfriend until 2 days ago. I found out through his employee file." Morgan turned toward me, her expression sharp. "You always act like you're better." Jake held up his hand. "Mel, don't. That's not what this is." My father leaned forward. "Did you ask Jake about her work?" Jake glanced at me, then back to Morgan. "You've asked about campaign details, strategies. You said it was for curiosity. You showed her proprietary work, I asked." Jake's voice dropped. "She saw parts of the Stratton's strategy, some materials." "That's confidential," I said. Morgan snapped. "It's not like I copied anything." I looked directly at her. "Your new boutique's launch looks a lot like that campaign." Jake rubbed his eyes. "That strategy was specific, the targeting model, the rollout dates." "It's just marketing," Morgan muttered. "No," I said. "It's theft." My father stood. "Is that true?" No one answered. Jake slowly pulled his chair back. "Mel, did you only push me toward Meridian to get access to Olivia's work?" Her voice was low. "I just wanted to level the field. She always gets everything." Jake looked stunned. "My mother whispered, 'We believed you, every time you said Olivia hurt you.'" I turned to her. "It wasn't that I said something. It was that I existed, and you believed her because it was easier." My father shook his head slowly. "We were wrong." Morgan sat perfectly still. Then she said, "You don't know what it was like, being compared to her every day. You gave her respect. You gave me pity." Jake stood up. "I need a minute." He stepped away from the table. Morgan didn't follow. My mother stared down at her plate. My father reached for his water but didn't drink. I sat quietly and watched them all. Everything that had been unspoken was now out in the open, and it was only just beginning. Jake returned to the table slowly. He didn't sit right away, just stood behind his chair, his hands resting lightly on the back of it. My mother had stopped crying, but still held her napkin in both hands, like something might break. My father was staring down at his plate. Jake spoke first. "I need to understand something. The last 6 months, was any of it real?" Morgan looked up at him. "Of course it was. You lied to me," he said. "Not harshly, just stating it. You never told me Olivia was your sister. You said she was controlling, selfish. You made her sound like a stranger." Morgan reached across the table toward him. "Jake, that wasn't about us. You and I, that was real." He didn't move. "You asked about my work. You watched me build things, then mirrored them in your business. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" My father cleared his throat. "What's he talking about?" I stayed quiet. Jake looked over. "The boutique's marketing plan matches one of our proprietary campaigns almost exactly. A strategy we developed internally with algorithms and data modeling. That didn't come from a template." Morgan leaned back in her chair. "I didn't steal anything. I asked questions and he answered." I looked at Jake. "Did you show her anything before it launched?" He nodded slowly. "Mock-ups. Early versions of the rollout timeline. I thought she was just interested." My mother looked stunned. "Morgan, that's not okay. I was trying to help Jake," she said. "His work matters to him." "But you were helping yourself," my father said quietly, "at your sister's expense." Morgan crossed her arms. "Everything I've ever done has been in her shadow. You all act like she's perfect." Jake stepped back. "You told me she tried to steal your boyfriend in college." "That never happened," I said. "I didn't even know who he was until after they broke up." "You said she humiliated you at the anniversary party," Jake added. "I wasn't even there," I said. "I was sick that weekend. Ask anyone." Morgan's voice rose. "She always turns everything around. You don't know what it was like growing up with her." "No," Jake said. "But I know what it's like to be lied to be used." He looked around the table, then down at Morgan. "I need space." Morgan's mouth opened like she might argue, but she closed it again. He pulled his chair out and sat down this time, leaving a full foot of space between them. My mother reached for her water glass. "This is a lot." My father didn't speak. Morgan turned toward me. "You think you've never hurt me? You think just because you get good grades and wear button-up shirts, you're some saint?" I looked back at her. "I think I've spent 30 years walking on eggshells, trying not to say the wrong thing, trying not to outshine you. You act like you've had it so hard. You pretended to be me," I said. "You withdrew my Harvard application." My mother's head snapped up. "What, I stayed steady. Senior year. They told me someone called to cancel. I was at a debate tournament. I didn't find out until months later." My father blinked. "That can't be true." "Check the phone records," I said. "It came from our house." My mother looked at Morgan. "Did you do that?" Morgan didn't answer. My father asked again. "Morgan." She finally said I didn't want her to leave. My mother whispered something, but her voice was too low to hear. I continued. "It wasn't the first time. You told Grandpa I wasn't reliable. He pulled me from the job at his firm, said I wasn't ready." My father looked confused. "You told me she missed deadlines. I never missed a single one I said." Jake exhaled. "You said she embarrassed you at company dinners. I was never even invited," I said. Morgan's voice dropped. "I needed something to be mine. Jake was mine." But you used him, I said. You hid the truth. You fed him lies about me. You placed him in my department. Jake turned his face slightly away. My mother sat back. Morgan, we believed everything you told us. My father nodded. We never even asked Olivia for her side. I know, I said. It was easier to believe I was the problem. No, my father said. But he didn't finish. Morgan was staring at the floor. After a long silence, she spoke. I'm not proud of what I did. But I'm not the only one who got things wrong. My mother said we failed both of you. My father looked older than he had an hour ago. We thought you needed more help, Morgan. We thought Olivia was strong enough to manage without us. Jake leaned forward. What happens now? No one answered. The waiter returned to ask about dessert. No one had an appetite. The cake sat untouched, its white frosting flawless, as if nothing had happened at all. But everything had. And it wasn't over yet. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. My desk felt like neutral ground after the night before. I turned on my monitor, opened the HR policy folder, and pulled up the section on conflict of interest. Section 4.3 dealt with romantic relationships and reporting structures. Section 5.2 covered anything that could create the appearance of bias. I had barely made it through the second paragraph when there was a knock at my door. Jake stood there holding a cup of coffee. He clearly wasn't drinking. Can I come in? I nodded and gestured to the chair across from me. He sat carefully, like the furniture might break. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize, I said. You didn't know. I should have, he replied. She always changed the subject when I talked about work. Never wanted to see pictures from our team events. She even told me not to go to the company holiday dinner. He rubbed a hand down his face, and I thought she was just shy. We sat in silence for a moment. I looked through our code of conduct this morning, I said. There's no rule against working in the same company as a family member's partner, but we do have disclosure requirements. He nodded. I read that part last night. I'll be recommending that you transfer to another department, I said. Not because I question your work, but because this situation's gotten too complicated. Digital marketing has a strategist opening, he said. Lateral move, no direct reporting line. That works, I said. I'll talk to HR. He shifted in his seat. Do you think this is going to follow me? The leak, I mean. I paused. I don't know yet. Her boutique's campaign overlaps enough with our Stratton pitch to raise eyebrows. I haven't made a formal report, but I'm documenting everything. Jake lowered his eyes. I didn't think I was sharing anything confidential. She asked about concepts, general trends. I didn't think she was copying. Even if you didn't mean to share sensitive data, I said she may have used it that way. He nodded slowly. I feel like an idiot. You're not, I said. You trusted someone. There was a long pause. Jake looked up again. I don't think I even know who she really is. The Morgan I was with. She wasn't the one I saw at that dinner. We didn't say much after that. He thanked me for being fair. I said he'd earned the promotion. We agreed to keep things professional. Not long after he left, my phone rang. Timothy Vaughn, our CEO. I stood, took a breath, and answered. Olivia, he said. My wife was at the Charleston last night. She overheard some of what happened. I sat back down. Yes, it was unexpected. She mentioned something about confidential material being shared outside the company. Should we be concerned? I kept my voice steady. I'm reviewing the situation. Jake is transferring departments. I've documented the potential leak and will escalate if necessary. There was a pause on the line. Good, he said. Keep me informed. For what it's worth, Jake's performance has been solid. I'd hate to lose him over this. When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. At least work had structure. Later that afternoon, 3 text messages arrived in quick succession. The first from my mother. Can we talk? The second from Morgan. You've ruined everything again. And the third from my father. Lunch tomorrow, my office. I owe you an apology. I answered only one. Lunch works. The next day I met my parents at their house for dinner, just the 4 of us. Morgan was already seated when I arrived. She didn't look up from her phone. Jake broke up with me, she said flatly. Are you happy? My father gave her a sharp look. Morgan. What? It's true. I didn't respond. My mother brought out a roast chicken and set it on the table. The meal was quiet. Forks scraped plates. Water glasses clinked against coasters. My father asked how work was going. I answered truthfully busy, but manageable. He's thinking of leaving the company, Morgan said. Said he wants a clean break. That's his choice, I replied. I hope he doesn't. He's good at what he does. Morgan's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. After dinner, we moved to the living room. My mother sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly. I've been thinking a lot about the patterns we've allowed, she said, and the things we missed. My father nodded. We owe you an apology. I didn't say anything right away, my mother continued. When Morgan was born, I had severe postpartum depression. I didn't bond with her. You were 4 and already trying to help. I looked at her. You used to bring her toys, she said. Sing to her. I remember thinking my child is a better mother than I am. She paused. By the time I got help, she was nearly 2. I felt guilty. I tried to make up for it in ways I didn't even see. My father added, We let things slide. We thought you didn't need us as much. You were independent. Morgan seemed more fragile. You enabled her, I said, and I stopped expecting anything from you. There was a long silence. Morgan looked up. You think I don't know? I was the family project. You think I didn't hear the way you talked about me when you thought I wasn't listening? My mother shook her head. Sweetheart, you never trusted me, Morgan said. You just handled me. I watched her closely. She turned to me. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed. It starts with truth, I said. No more lies, no more pretending. She looked uncertain. I started seeing someone, a therapist. She says I have patterns, validation seeking, insecurity, that kind of thing. That's a good start, I said. My father leaned forward. We want to do better, for both of you. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. As I left that night, Morgan said quietly, I'm going to try. That was all she said. But for now, it was enough. A few weeks passed. The shock from that night had settled into something quieter. At the office, things were steady. Jake moved to digital marketing without complaint, and our team adjusted quickly. He and I kept things cordial, just enough eye contact, just enough conversation. We passed in meetings. We shared data when needed. Nothing more. One Monday morning, my calendar pinged. It was a reminder, Diane's birthday dinner, take 2, 7 p.m. This time it wasn't at the Charleston. Just a small Italian place my mother liked. Red booths, soft lighting, checkered tablecloths. No speeches, no long tables, just the 4 of us. Morgan was the one who picked the restaurant. That afternoon my phone rang. It was her. Hey, she said. You're still coming, right? I am. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, I'm rebranding the boutique. New name, new strategy. And I'm not using anything from Meridian this time. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, that's a good decision. If you have time, she added, I'd appreciate a little feedback. As a sister, not a competitor. I can do that, I said. That night we all met at the restaurant. My father held the door for my mother. Morgan had already grabbed a corner booth. We ordered pasta and shared garlic bread. The conversation started slow weather work, the new paint color in the living room. Then during dessert, my mother pulled a small box from her purse. This is for you, she said, handing it across the table. Inside was a silver bracelet. 4 small charms hung from the chain, a book, a paintbrush, a star, and a heart. The book is for your intelligence, she said. The paintbrush for creativity. The star for your accomplishments. And the heart is for forgiveness. I looked at her. I'm working on that part. My father set down his fork. Your mother and I have been reflecting. A lot. We missed a lot of signs. We failed you, Olivia. And we failed Morgan, too. Morgan shifted in her seat, but she didn't argue. We can't undo the past, my mother added. But we want to be more mindful moving forward. They mentioned therapy joint sessions they'd started attending, something recommended by a counselor at their church. I nodded. It wasn't everything, but it was more than I ever thought I'd hear from them. The following week, an invitation arrived in my inbox. Aunt Sarah was hosting a family weekend at the lake. Normally, I would have said yes right away. This time, I paused. I checked my calendar. I had 2 client meetings scheduled that Friday, one of them with a long-time account I'd worked hard to retain. I thought about rescheduling. Then I didn't. I called my father that evening. I won't be at the lake house this time. I have work. There was a quiet moment on the line. We'll miss you, he said, but I understand. Maybe next time. That was all. At work, things kept moving. Jake and I didn't interact much, but when we did, it was easy. One morning, he stopped by my office. Do you have the old sketches from the Peterson pitch, he asked. Digital is building something new off that structure. I pulled them from the archive and emailed them over. How are things with your family? He asked as he lingered at the door. Different, I said. Not perfect, but more honest. He nodded. That's good. Honesty matters. He hesitated. And how are you still figuring it out? I said. But better. Jake gave a small smile. Glad I stayed. I looked up. Me too. Later that week, I had dinner with Erin. Same booth, same order. She let me vent when things got messy and let me sit in silence when I didn't have the words. So she said, swirling her straw through her drink, still on speaking terms with the sister. We're trying, I said. She's going to therapy. She's taking responsibility. Slowly. Erin raised her eyebrows. You think people like Morgan can really change? I'm not waiting for perfection, I said. I just want progress. She tapped the edge of her glass. And boundaries, I'm keeping them. Erin leaned back. Good. You deserve better than what they gave you all those years. I didn't disagree. But I also didn't want to hold on to every old wound. That night on the drive home, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the dinner, the unraveling, the shift. Maybe we weren't a picture-perfect family. Maybe we never had been. But something real had started, and I wasn't going to let it disappear. 1 month after the birthday dinner, I was still adjusting to how different everything felt. Morgan and I spoke now, though, cautiously. We texted more than we called. She sent me photos of her boutique redesign and screenshots of her new website mock-ups. I answered when I could, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to see what she would do on her own this time. She was still in therapy. She'd mentioned it once at dinner, said her therapist had her working through family patterns and the stories we tell ourselves. That phrase stuck with me. At work, Jake and I kept things professional. We shared space in meetings but didn't linger afterward. If there was tension, it was muted like a radio, playing just low enough not to distract. Then one morning, he stopped by my office again. It was early. I was still finishing my coffee. Got a minute, he asked. Sure, I said, waving him in. He leaned against the doorway holding a folder. Digital's pitching a new strategy to one of our smaller clients. We're borrowing structure from the Peterson campaign. I wanted to double-check that we weren't overlapping with anything reserved for Stratton. I reached for my keyboard. Let me pull the early notes. As I scrolled through the archived folders, he lingered. How's your mom doing? He asked. Better, I said. She's softer lately. It's new. He nodded slowly. My mother texted me after that dinner. She asked if I was okay. I told her I wasn't sure. I found the files and sent them to him. There you go. That version is clean. No client-specific elements. Thanks, he said. He started to leave, then turned back. You're different than how Morgan described you, he said. She made you sound cold. Ambitious to the point of cruel. I didn't answer right away. I see now, he added, she was trying to protect her version of things. But I wish I'd asked more questions. I nodded. We all build versions of people when we're trying to justify something. That seemed to settle it. He left without another word. That weekend I visited my parents' house for coffee. Just coffee. No big meal, no candles, no guest list. My mother poured cinnamon creamer into her mug and offered me a lemon scone she'd baked herself. She wasn't trying too hard. She was just present. We've been doing the sessions, she said. Family therapy. Just your father and me for now. How's it going? I asked. We're learning to listen. It was the best thing she could have said. On the way out, my father followed me to the porch. I got a call from your Aunt Sarah, he said. Apparently she told us years ago that Morgan was manipulating things. I turned toward him, and I didn't believe her, he admitted. But she was right. He looked tired, not in a defeated way, but in the way someone looks when they've stopped pretending. "We let things go on for too long," he said, "because it was easier than addressing what we didn't want to see." I nodded. "I know." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just stood there while I got into my car. That was enough. Back at the office, the next few weeks passed quickly. Spring deadlines were stacking up, a new client was coming on board, and my team was busy onboarding them. One Friday, Morgan texted again, "Want to grab lunch next week? Just us." I said yes. We met at a little diner on Main Street, formica tables, plastic menus, silver napkin holders. She wore jeans and a sweater, no makeup, her hair pulled back. "I know it'll take time," she said once we'd ordered. "I just want to say I'm still doing the work." "I believe that," I said. She sipped her coffee. "I'm not asking you to forget everything, but I hope you'll keep letting me try." That part mattered. She wasn't rushing the process. She wasn't rewriting it either. We split the bill. As we stood outside under the early spring sun, she reached into her tote bag. "I brought something," she said, pulling out a small folder. "It's my revised pitch deck for the boutique." I flipped through it briefly. No echoes of Meridian campaigns, no mirrored formatting. It was clean. It was hers. "This is good," I said. Her eyes softened. "That means a lot." On the drive back to the office, I passed the park where we used to go as kids, back when she still held my hand crossing the parking lot. I remembered the way she used to run ahead, then stop and turn, waiting for me to catch up. Maybe that was what we were doing now, slowing down, relearning pace, letting each other catch up. The weeks that followed brought a quiet kind of peace I hadn't known in years. Morgan and I weren't perfect, not by any stretch, but the walls between us had started to come down. We spoke with more honesty and fewer defenses. I saw her trying, and that made all the difference. Therapy wasn't a cure-all, but it gave her tools to understand herself and the damage we'd both endured. At family dinners now, there was a new rhythm. My parents spoke more openly, no longer caught in the web of old patterns. Diane's apologies were sincere, and Robert carried less of the frustration he'd hidden for so long. It was as if we were all learning how to be a family for the first time. Work remained a refuge. Jake and I had settled into a professional routine that felt comfortable, even respectful. The tension that once hung between us had faded into quiet understanding. He was still talented, still driven, and I knew we'd both grown from the chaos that had touched our lives. One evening, as I closed the office door behind me, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined as a child. There was no grand reconciliation or sudden forgiveness. Instead, there was something more valuable: truth acceptance, and the fragile hope that comes from facing the past with clear eyes. Family isn't always easy. Sometimes it's messy and painful, filled with disappointments and mistakes. But it's also where we find the chance to grow, to set boundaries, and to reclaim our worth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that justice doesn't always come from punishment or retribution. Sometimes it comes from finally being seen for who you really are and being brave enough to stand in that light. If this story resonates with you, or if you've faced your own moments of family struggle and healing, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to share your experience or simply take a moment to reflect. And if you want to hear more stories about resilience, dignity, and the complex beauty of family, consider subscribing. Thank you for listening.